Hi everybody, welcome to the June PhUSE webinar Wednesday. Glad you could all join us today. My name's Yvonne Moores. I'm the Special Projects Director for PhUSE, and I'm just going to take you through the agenda for today and then hand you over to some of the presenters that are going to present on a lot of the CSS work and summary that took place last week and has been going on throughout the year. So I'm going to give you a quick overview from a PhUSE Board of Directors perspective, some of the things that's coming up within PhUSE. Then I'm going to hand over to Sue, who will take us through the non-clinical CSS summary. Then on to Mary, who will take us through standard analyses and code sharing. Then Andy and DJ, who will talk about the Emerging Trends and Technologies Working Group. And then Eli, who's going to talk about the new project, which is the open source technology in clinical research. So as I said, I'm Yvonne Moores, Special Projects Director. I'm just going to take you through a few slides really just to talk about some updates that's been happening from a PhUSE perspective and on the board as well. So the CSS was last week in Silver Spring in Maryland. It was a huge success, lots of attendees, lots of great presentations. All the presentations are now available on the PhUSE website if you wanted to go and have a look at them. And as I said, each of the working group leads will be going through a summary of what was presented there and ongoing activities within their working groups as well. So you'll get to hear a lot more about the CSS throughout the rest of the webinar. Just wanted to highlight about the EU Connect conference in Amsterdam at the end of the year as well. That's the 10th to the 13th of November. Registration is now open for that conference, and the early bird rate closes the 26th of July. So please get your registrations in as quickly as you can to attend. We've actually got 19 streams at the conference this year, which is a great number. 3 of those are actually new. We've got a work stream on leadership and innovation. We've got one on personnel management, and we've got one on professional development. They're all new to the conference streams this year. So have a look online on the website within the PhUSE area. There's lots more information about each of the different streams and what will be being presented as part of the theme there. Just wanted to also highlight that registration and call for papers opens just under 2 weeks for the US Connect conference, which next year will be in Orlando. That's from the 8th to the 11th of March 2020. So look out for that registration and call for papers email that will be coming out, and hopefully you'll be able to send your abstracts in to present at that conference as well. And then just wanted to highlight some of the other areas that we're looking for registration now. We run a large number of single day events, as I'm sure you're all aware. There's 2 coming up in July, so if you wanted to register for your attendance there's one in Hoboken in New Jersey, which is talking about artificial intelligence and the digital transformation of healthcare. And then we've also got one in Bangalore in India on the 27th of July, which is looking at avoiding digitization and modernization as not an option. So they're 2 areas of interest across the world. If you wanted to register, please go on to the PhUSE website and do so now. Just wanted to talk about some of the working groups as well, looking for volunteers. Some of the newer projects, I mean, all the working groups are always looking for new volunteers as we go through those working group life cycles. But there's some specific new projects that need volunteers to register an interest as soon as you can. That's the one that we're going to talk about today, which is the open source technologies in clinical research. The aim of that working group is to provide guidance to the use of open source technology in a regulatory environment within the pharma industry, thinking about things like R and Python, but obviously not just limited to those 2 pieces of software. We've also got the SDSP XML. The deliverable for that project is available to provide a prototype package to look at how that can be done. And if you wanted to volunteer for any of those projects, then please feel free to reach out to the working groups at PhUSE.eu email, and they will put you in touch with the right person to get yourself added to those working groups and look at all the information that's already being shared or worked on within the wiki, etc., that those working groups use. So quite a few weeks ago, we had a press announcement, which we're very excited about. We have been handed over 2 translate guidance tools to help promote the clinical data transparency and patient privacy aspects within PhUSE. So Translate have given us the oversight of those documents now. There's a link in here to the press release, and there's also a link to the white papers, which are available also on the PhUSE website. If you go into the working groups area, there's a white papers section, and you will be able to look at what those 2 Translate guidance tools are, and they will be being used throughout the data transparency working group project that's ongoing as well. Also wanted to highlight that there's a number of PhUSE Board of Director positions becoming available. This is because of every 2 years we have a cycle where we re-elect the directors for specific positions. We also highlight here any new positions that's become available on the board because they're new roles. So for the next round of vacancies, we have quite a number coming up. We have a collaborations director available for somebody based in the US, primarily because of their interactions with the FDA. We have an EMEA director, which we would prefer to be EU based given the role there. We have the memberships director role available, the special projects director role available, and the operations director role available. Hopefully you've all seen the email that came out with regards to this. The current directors can all renominate themselves for those roles, but those roles are also available for other candidates to put themselves forward for. So please look at the email, send your nominations to the PhUSE office, and take a note of the closing date for those applications, which is the end of July 2019. So just wanted to also highlight our next webinar Wednesday. No agenda at this stage, but we know it's going to be on the 24th of July, and there will be information being sent out before that date to let you know what the content is. Just as a reminder that that next webinar will be at the same time as this one, which is 3 p.m. UK time, which is 10 a.m. US, 4 p.m. Europe, and 7:30 p.m. India. So hopefully, again, we'll get to see you all at that next webinar Wednesday. So with that, I will hand over to the presenters. Just wanted to make you aware that you are able to ask questions, but they would need to be put through the chat window. So as you're going through the webinar, if you go into the chat window, put your questions in there as we're going along, and we'll get to answer those at the end of the webinar session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. Hi, everyone. I am Susan DeHaven, one of the co-leads of the Non-Clinical Topics Working Group, along with Patty Brundage. And I agree with what Yvonne said. We had a really successful CSS, and I want to give you an overview of the activities that we had and some of the upcoming activities that were spurred from all the great collaboration that we had. So here on my title slide is an image from our annual Send Readiness Survey. We continue to track the implementation of electronic data submission for non-clinical studies year on year. We did our 4th annual survey today, and you'll see that was a topic of our Breakout 1. And our mission is really continuing to progress e-data implementation for submissions, but not only for submissions, also for advancing drug development. Oops, this is supposed to be in presentation mode. That'll be better. Okay, so I'll just give you an overview of our breakouts. The first one we spent really on the implementation status and data issues. We had a kickoff of that around the results of the readiness survey, and there's quite a lot of interesting metrics. We had responses to the survey from multiple countries, multiple roles within companies, from technicians to quality to IT, consultants, all kinds of perspectives, which is something we always try to do. The key observations that we take away from this year's survey is that the experience is really deepening in industry, and there's really growing use and growing interest in the use of SEND data, non-clinical data, beyond just the electronic submission requirements. And then from there, we went on to discuss a presentation that was given by Jesse Anderson from FDA on some of the examples of issues that they're seeing through their Kickstart process on the electronic data that's been submitted. And he brought up a couple of very specific examples, and it really triggered a good conversation among the whole group to progress both the understanding of the people submitting the data on why certain things are important, certain details are important to the utilization of the data by the FDA. And then also, it was really a bi-directional conversation where Jesse and the FDA folks in the room could hear about some of the issues that are being faced in industry around, why these examples show up the way they do. And we just really discussed what kind of things we could do to help advance the quality, conformance, and usefulness of the data together. So it was really an informative discussion. And of course, Jesse's slides are available as well on the website, or the wiki site. And then in Breakout 2, we dove into what we call the implementation challenges. Last year, during one of our breakouts, we developed a list of challenges from the perspectives of the different roles from industry, from drug development industry, that are the key players. And we had enough of a table full of representations from each of these perspectives to get some really good feedback. We did that last year, and we decided to come back this year and check in. How are our challenges evolving? Are there any new challenges? For the ones that were overcome, how were they overcome? And we had a variety of those. And the really interesting thing was, especially for people in the room who have worked on PhUSE projects in the past, who work on the CDISC standard development teams, we really found that where in many areas where challenges were improved or overcome, it was attributable, at least in part, to deliverables from PhUSE and deliverables from CDISC. And there's a couple of examples here. The SDSP guide from the Optimizing the Use of Data Standards Working Group was pointed out as something that helped pharma companies overcome the SDSP challenge of what they saw in the TCG and the Technical Conformance Guide of needing to do that document. So that was brought out as an example of value for sure. Also, the SEND implementation forum has become a kind of a go-to reference for quite a lot of people, and the CDISC SEND team has developed some improvements to the PC and PP domain that are currently close to being published, I think. And these things were the work of a lot of people in the room, and so we really felt good about that. Over 40 challenges were reviewed across the 5 different perspectives, and the status of that challenge list and some of the notes from that conversation are posted on the wiki. In Breakout 3, this was a really interesting collaboration with BioCellerate, which is a subgroup of Transcellerate, focused on non-clinical data. They really put together a terrific presentation to prompt the people in the room to think about what kind of cross-study analyses could be empowered by the SEND data sets. And now we're a few years into the requirement, and databases are building. And they did a terrific presentation to get people in the room thinking. And then Patty Brundage from FDA gave a really interesting slide presentation of 5 examples of actual cross-study analysis that had been done in the FDA in the past, but had been done powered by what we would call manually, I guess, pulling reports, reading them, pulling out data tables, really building the case for these cross-study analyses, with time and sweat and keyboards. After that discussion, we had essentially a workshop format where we took these different cross-study analyses use cases and took a look at our data model and said, is our data model robust enough to power these analyses? And we really came out with some interesting and positive news relative to the SEND data model. And so we're hoping to continue to work with Biocelerate to develop some real cases and real uses of the SEND data to promote their efforts in developing the justification behind the value of these databases and help promote that into industry. And there was also some observations that, the continued work that we do to harmonize and enrich the models can support even new applications of SEM for cross-study analysis that we haven't even thought of yet. So that was a really thought-provoking breakout discussion. I think everyone enjoyed. And then last but not least in our process, we spent our last breakout thinking about new project possibilities. And it turns out that with the organization of the Nonclinical Working Group, we have several teams that are more or less in an ongoing maintenance mode, the NSDRG team and also the SEND Implementation Working Group. And for a lot of the topics that came up, these fit well into existing teams. So we're going to move forward with discussing with those teams about addressing some of these current suggestions. Also, the TCG, the Technical Conformance Guide implementation, came up as a topic of challenge, and we thought maybe we could help with an impact assessment as these things come out. And there already is a CDISC sub-team of the SEND core team who is addressing non-clinical topics on TCG. So they really stepped up and said they would be interested in participating in that. And then also we are waiting. Last year we triggered an effort in FDA to really explore what the non-clinical needs were around DeFine. And we expect the feedback from FDA this summer. We actually hope to have a webinar about that. And so that will be coming up. We had one new project that was suggested around QC best practices for SEND. There was some great work in Japan that could also contribute to that from the Japan CDIS user group. And just on that topic, as it came up as a challenge, just within the room, we almost immediately had 2 co-leaders and more than 10 project volunteers. So that's another one where we'll be calling for more participation, and you can use the working groups at PhUSE email that Yvonne mentioned to volunteer to join that team. And so the summary of the entire non-clinical topics activities are in construction on the non-clinical topics working group wiki site, and you can look there to learn more and get into the details of some of those activities. If you're on the call, thank you so much for attending this year. We really had a great time and another year of really great experience and learning. So thank you, and I will pass it on to Mary.
Thank you, Sue. All right, do you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. All right, do you see my slides? I am trying to get into presentation mode, but that seems to be, oh, there it goes. Maybe. Okay, almost there, I think. Yeah, that's it. All right, great. So I'm Mary Nilsson. I'm one of the co-leads with Haming on the Standard Analyses and Code Sharing Working Group. And I can give a summary of our breakout sessions, which we also believe we had a very productive CSS this year. Now, our working group has 6 projects, and 4 of the 6 projects did have breakout sessions in some way, shape, or form. The other 2 projects, the Quality Control and Validation Project, while we didn't have a breakout session, that group did have a poster. And the Macro Development Project, we did still discuss it briefly, but primarily it's, we're really recruiting for participation in that project. It's a relatively new project. But I'll give more detail on the breakout sessions we did have for these remaining 4 projects. So Sunday night, we had the Safety Analytics Workshop, and this was hosted by our Analysis and Display White Papers project team. And this is a workshop that I presented, and we did have good attendance and good discussion, so that was really good. It was a 2-hour workshop. But for us to meet our education goals, this is related to educational goals for safety analyses. And for us to meet those goals, we actually have to leverage the slides and recording quite broadly. So we're not going to meet our goals with just the people who did choose to attend, which was great. It was great. And thank you to those who attended. But in order for us to meet our goals, we do need to leverage those slides and the recording, and hopefully we can ask the entire PhUSE community to help us with that. So I'd say look for within a month or so, hopefully we can get an announcement out that you can share with all of your colleagues at your various places to help get the word out on those educational information. So we had a breakout session where Matt Sukub gave a presentation on some of the activities going on at the FDA. For us, when pertaining to standard analyses and code sharing, the main things that are changing quite drastically from our perspective is that FDA statisticians will be getting more involved in reviewing safety analysis plans and the results. And they are building a statistical analyst group, and they're also creating a statistical best practice guidance. We would be looking forward to seeing that. The other relatively significant news is that the FDA will be offering a Type C meeting with the specific purpose of reviewing integrated safety analysis plans. So what that might mean for sponsors, if they're not already creating analysis plans for their submissions or integrated plans early, they'll probably need to start doing those early, or maybe people have been creating those and just not sharing those with the FDA at an early stage. So the idea here is that these analysis plans are created early and should be with the FDA early and have thoughtful discussions with FDA statisticians involved. And we see this as a very good thing because we have recognized the need for improvement in how we do integrated analyses, safety analyses. And that is one of the things that our white papers cover. We actually give a fair amount of recommendations both for individual study and integrated analyses, and we are absolutely trying to improve how integrated analyses are done. So we think this is all good movement toward facilitating improvement. Okay, another breakout session was Jared facilitated a discussion on trying to create front ends for our safety analytics education and for the script repository. So we just want a better way for people to find what we have and maneuver and get a basic understanding. And especially in the case of the script repository, we want a place if people click on a link, and even if they're not very familiar with PhUSE, they'll get a quick understanding of what the code sharing is about and feel like they can easily find code and share code and know what they need to do. So this breakout session was to show the group kind of what has been started and get some feedback. So this is very much in the relatively early stages, but hopefully it will get, after getting some feedback and getting some movement, we'll get some of these things completed. We also discussed as part of the communication, promotion, education project team, just general ideas on how to improve socialization of the deliverables. Our working group, unlike some of all of your working groups, our deliverables aren't referenced in a technical conformance guide or anything kind of somewhat official. So we do have some awareness challenges, and usually every year we try to brainstorm and improve on that. And I think we are improving over the years, but we continue to try to get that even better. Okay, we had a breakout session with the data visualization project team from the Emerging Trends in Technology working group. So we had a couple, our working group and that project team get together. And so Mike Rubison, Sharon Wang, Eric, PhUSE, all was part of this discussion. And the main discussion with this breakout session was talking about the pilots that we have ongoing and how to share an interactive display. So we did complete a proof of concept with CDIS pilot data. That's been completed. We tested, there was an MP4 and HTML formats that were tested, and we were able to prove that we can share an interactive display with the FDA, and we proved that when the FDA receives it, the interactive capabilities actually work. And we also have a real submission team who's piloting an interactive display that's ongoing this year, so that's in progress. So we are, perhaps it's not all that meaningful, but we were testing a volcano plot. It almost doesn't matter which plot we're testing, but volcano plot is an interesting plot to have interactive features for. So those people who don't know what that is, it's a place where you can put your treatment emergent adverse event data all in one plot. Usually a TEAE table, is pages and pages long. This kind of puts all your data all in one plot, and it graphs it with either an odds ratio risk difference on one end, and then a p-value that, just a number between 0 and 1 that shows how strong your evidence is for an imbalance. So you can look at magnitude of effect and evidence for an imbalance all in one figure, and then the interactivity allows you to hover over a dot, lasso over a dot to get the data. You can have a drop-down menu to look at particular system organ classes. So it's a really cool plot to be the first one we're trying to get interactive features for. So hopefully, we'll get more and more people interested in creating interactive displays. And then we just updated each other on visual-related activities in general. Okay, and another breakout session we had pertained to the test data set factory project, and Peter Schaefer facilitated this discussion. And for those of you who don't know, this project team finalized SCTM and ADAM test data. They took the existing CDIS data and then updated it to be consistent with the latest standards, because the original pilot data was created, quite some time with older standards, and that had been done already last year. So now they're thinking of the phase 2 of their project, which is actually simulating test data. And this was a chance to get input on the direction for this project, and also the analysis and display white paper project team shared their wish list for test data, because as we work on our white papers, we actually show mock tables and mock figures, and when you make a mock figure, you need some data to work with, and it really helps to have data that actually has special features of it so that it shows the display in a better way. And the existing CDIS pilot data, for example, doesn't have a whole lot going on with labs, so it's kind of a boring figure if you don't have much going on with labs, for example. So we had a good discussion on how for the direction of that phase 2 of their project. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Haming now. We did have a couple breakout sessions that we conducted concurrently, so I didn't attend this whole discussion. So Haming, can you chime in on this slide?
Sure. I would like to add what Mary said about the test data factory. So actually, there's 2 sets of data set they have developed. Actually, we already published into the GitHub. So if anyone interested in getting those data sets, they are in PhUSE script repository on GitHub. So for the code sharing breakout session, we explored the scripts in the PhUSE script repository on the GitHub. And we currently have many groups. They have put their scripts in the in this repository on GitHub. the challenge that we have is that how we can let people know those scripts are there, how they can explore those. And initially we were trying to create those like index. So if you go to the PhUSE script repository, there's a wiki page, you can go to look at the index. But with all the development there, it is very hard to maintain that index because we have to create those manually. So we started thinking about how we can create kind of a framework so that people can contribute and we will be able to easily get all the information and present to the user. So that's one way studying the script metadata for sharing project. We have published a white paper, and I have demonstrated the PhUSE package that we developed using the script metadata and presented the application framework. And I demoed how you could put those scripts in the GitHub, and with the metadata added, to describe the script that will be immediately showing up in this application framework. So this is like we did a proof of concept with a few R scripts, and this is just like a kind of our first phase. We would like to get feedback on those. So if anyone that familiar with R and like to get this package, it's very easy. You can just install it from the Chrome, basically that's comprehensive R archive network, and is the package name is just called PhUSE. And then we have a review of the current project we plan to do in our group, and then we specifically review the new language Julia and look into the potential usage of this. So the Julia language has been there for a few years, but I don't think many of us know this. And then actually that's kind of my first time I know that a few weeks before I attended the conference, because Chris Hurley would like to start the Julia initiative in our working group. So I think this is the part of the language we need to pay attention, because there's lots of strengths, and based on the information on the website, Julia language can actually combine R and Python strengths together. So if you have created a R and Python script, it can embed it into the environment as well. And it has lots of strengths to like a big data process, and there's lots of parallel computing strengths that lots of computer can offer. And then we, for our project, we started thinking what we could do for the remainder of 2019 and maybe next year. We have identified some high priority tasks. One of them is like 4 targets that from white paper agriculture Mary's group that they have identified. So we have published like all those white paper. There's 4 table figure listings that's important. Currently, there's no script for that in the repository. So, but we would like to work with FDA to hope that they get the feedback, thinking those are the 4 targeted script we need to develop as well. So those are the things that one FDA, there actually a few attended, we have discussed. I hope that I can get into like FDA monthly agenda to talk about this. And then we have discussed R and the Julia initiative, how we want to maybe identify some of a project using those R and the Julia language to start some of projects. So I think this is the summary of this breakout session. So Mary, can
I'll take it back. So one other breakout session we had was in collaboration with the Data Collection Instructions Project from the Optimizing Data Standards Working Group, and we talked about adverse event collection and treatment emergent definitions. And the main goal of this breakout was to talk about the project and actually recruit participants. We've been trying to get a white paper out the door, made some progress, and things have slowed down. So the good news is it does sound like we got a couple of volunteers, and hopefully we can make progress on these white papers. All right, I think we're ready to pass on.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Hangming.
And I think it comes over to me. So thank you, Mary. I am Andy Richardson, and the next session is on the emerging trends and technologies contribution at CSS. Before we talk about the very active participation at CSS, I would just like to welcome DJ as co-lead to the group. He has joined the group to join me very recently to co-lead the group, and I'm very grateful to have you on board, DJ, and look forward very much to as we move forward with the Emerging Trends and Technologies group. ET&T was very active at the CSS, and with many of the projects contributing with workshops and training and breakout sessions. The slide here just gives the overview of our current active projects. Some are older than others. Cloud adoption, data visualization, investigating fire, going translational, and machine learning and artificial intelligence all took a key effort and into the CSS with workshops and so on. Blockchain and KPI work, and the new project that Eli will talk to us about in a little while was not represented directly on this occasion at CSS. With no more ado, I'm going to hand this over to DJ, as it wasn't possible for me personally to join everybody at the CSS this year, but DJ was able to, and so I will hand it over to you, DJ, to take us through the summary of all the work that was done and the new initiatives from last week.
Well, thank you, Andy. I appreciate it. And as Andy mentioned, I joined as a co-lead shortly right before actually the CSS. So it was a great opportunity for me at the CSS to really get to know a little bit more about the projects and you know what areas I think are working well and what we need to change or tweak or get volunteers, as was mentioned before. So I'll go through the projects, give a status on the deliverables, and then really talk about what happened at the CSS for those of us that couldn't attend. So the first project is around the cloud adoption in the life sciences industry. And just to give everyone an update, there's about 25 folks who are in the group. They meet twice or bi-weekly, about twice every month. And they've published 4 documents out for public review, and they're officially been published. And these are basically all around a cloud framework in our industry. And in terms of next year's activities, it will be based off of how the CSS went this year. So for the cloud adoption team, there were 18 people that participated, either partially or fully. There were multiple sessions. And so I think from Andrew's perspective, there was, it was much better than they were hoping for, which is great. They had published a framework, as I mentioned, in May, and that really was the foundation on how you would enter sort of using the cloud framework or the cloud solutions in our industry. So I think the discussions that happened at the CSS were really around what is the next step, right? So now that there's a framework, what do we need to provide to vendors and to sponsor companies and CROs so that people can get on board with using cloud solutions, because they are being developed more rapidly, right? And so I think the discussions ultimately led to, how does the structure of this working group look moving forward? And I think the discussions were really around, well, let's create some more guidance documents to help inform companies. And I think with the goal being that we really need to get some buy-in, right, from some of the regulatory agencies on not just the framework, but also on the guidance documents, and really start to have pharma companies take a harder look and endorse it as well. And I think that's really playing off of past success in terms of deliverables that have come out in the past. So when you think of something like the reviewers guides or the DSP templates, I think they started and they were developed a long time ago, and I think over time they became the gold standard. And now you see the FDA sort of endorsing those those templates, right? So I think something along those lines is what this group is looking to follow suit in. The next project was the data visualizations for clinical data, and Mary mentioned one of the cross-collaboration projects, so I won't go into that. But there were 7 new members that joined as a result of the CSS, which is great. I know Sharon had mentioned that she had a lot of good discussions with FDA participants, of whom there were plenty, specifically around the best practices project, and really trying to bring them in to help inform, what does that strategy of this project look like? The subject level data review project is going to continue for a short period of time. And then there is the data anomaly project. So the presentations will be put into a summary, and then there's going to be a discussion around, what do we do next? And I think that's going to be really key for almost all these projects is, how do we either restructure the format of a group, or how do we create more concrete deliverables and start publishing those as opposed to having a large scope of tasks. And again, as Mary mentioned, there is the cross-collaborative project. Let's see. Okay. The next topic, or the next project team, was around the use of FHIR in clinical research. This is a very complex topic to begin with, I think, as are most of the projects in the ET&T working group. But I think one of the great positives was that there were some new members that attended, and they actually were really engaged, and they did provide some good content and good details and context around the use of FHIR. So that was really good to see. I think the key takeaway from this group was the need for more FHIR expertise, right? And I think one of the positives that came out of the CSS was that there were new contacts made that we can start reaching out to. And I think one of the key takeaways was, what's the sales pitch, or how do we get more individuals across industry interested and join enough to join the team, right? And while we are, I think, looking for folks with FHIR expertise, I think the other caveat is any volunteer who's really interested in this space or this topic, there's always roles, right, to help support a project. And you don't necessarily have to be an expert on the topic, but there are needs for things like project managers or reviewers, or people who can logically put together a process flow, right? I think there's a lot of different skills out there that can help. So I think if there is an interest, please consider joining, specifically because the FDA has made themselves quite clear. And there's a hyperlink in here around an FDA workshop recently, when you guys get all the slides, that makes it clear the FDA is very interested in FHIR and what can be done and how do you integrate things around different potential standards. So this is certainly going to be, almost definitive of what an emerging technology or trend looks like. So again, this is really one of those project teams that's going to need a lot of help. And so I would really strongly encourage folks to reach out. Then there was the Going Translational with Linked Data team. They had a really successful hands-on workshop before the official CSS began. And the goal was for participants to learn how do you use linked data, right, for the first time. So during the workshop, the participants essentially created a whiteboard model of their own clinical trial. And then they took that information and they exported that diagram over to the linked data model. And then the study data was augmented by linking it to information from clinicaltrials.gov and DBpedia. And then they employed some new, they basically employed a reasoner to infer new values and relationships that wasn't necessarily in the original data, right? And so they really tried to create assessments of things and inferences based on the data that was there. And then at the end, all the studies were merged together, and then they were queried sort of as a combined data pool to show that something like this is possible. So that was really, really, really cool to see, especially because this is a very complex topic. I think one of the lessons learned for this team that I think applies to all the project teams in ET&T and actually across all the working groups, I think, is that the breakout sessions were challenging. And I think the reason for it is because this is a complex topic and you have new attendees, we want to make sure that we wanted to sort of explain the topic and the content, but then there's a fine line, between that and really having folks engaged. And so one of the takeaways was to really refocus and have smaller task-based deliverables that we can actually complete and move on to the next step. And there was an updated project charter that's been submitted to the CSS steering committee. I think that's being reviewed right now. There was a lot of conversations with FDA attendees around some new collaborations and cooperations in the preclinical space. And I think what you'll see at the next CSS is more active engagement. I think project team, sub-project team specific breakouts to really make sure folks are engaged and active. Okay. And then the next project team, the last project team that actually met at the CSS was around the machine learning and artificial intelligence project. They did have a poster around SCTM mapping specification development using natural language processing and artificial intelligence, which was really well received. They also had a workshop around machine learning programming, which was, again, also really well received. There were discussions around the different sub-teams. And then the three projects that are going on right now, I think were really seen as the projects we want to focus on for this team. So they were around the SCTM mapping specification, so really taking what had been done in the poster and taking it to the next level. And I know that among the attendees at the CSS, including myself and my company, there was a lot of interest in providing our company's sort of mapping metadata to help bolster this project team's effort. There was also a work around medical coding, similar to that, and then a development of a chatbot. And this was really cool to see. So this is more of an AI initiative. And there was a sort of a simple proof of concept around how do we create a chatbot and what are the intricacies and the issues. And I think there was a few potential use cases, one for industry. There was actually a really interesting use case that was brought up by the FDA participants. And so I think that is one of the sub-project teams that we're going to move forward with a lot of vigor. And I think, again, for this project team, one of the asks was just getting some data from pharma. As I'd mentioned, that there were a lot of participants who were interested. The more, the better, obviously. And then some more project leaders. So I think, again, because this is a newer space, perhaps because some companies haven't had a lot of time to invest in it, I think there has been a little bit of a hesitancy to be engaged. But as I mentioned, it's not necessarily, pure data scientists that are being looked for. It's project managers, it's leaders, it's folks that can bring people together, right, and focus. So if you have a little bit of time, I think this would be a great opportunity. I think machine learning and AI and data science as a whole is really going to be the next step. So that's the summary of the different projects.
Just to say, sorry, DJ, we've just got 1 minute left.
Perfect. So this is a summary of the different projects that weren't discussed at the CSS. There's a blockchain technology project that's ongoing right now. They're looking at different solutions. There's the KPI and metrics group that's preparing a 2019 survey collection form. They're actively recruiting key contributors for that survey. And then there's this new project that I think Eli will be discussing a little bit more. And then Andy, do you want to wrap it up here with the last slide?
Yes, as you wish. Just come back to me. I won't repeat anything that's said, except to recognise, and we're very pleased that Anders Vidstrup, who leads the cloud adoption group and has done the sterling work in putting those documents together, was given the Exceptional Plane Builder Award at the conference this year, and there he is in front of his poster. We're very pleased about that. Thank you very much. So we'll hand over to Eli and to discuss what is actually a new project within the scope of ET&T. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
There we go. So this project was kind of born at PhUSE Connect this year. Some of us got together and realized there was kind of a opportunity for us to kind of formalize how the pharmaceutical industry is using open source technologies such as R and Python, and kind of where it can go in the future and what kind of obstacles do we see ahead. So our objective listed here is meant to be pretty broad. So we really want to keep this project open for all sorts of future deliverables, and just really kind of keep an open mind to the paths that the industry can take to really make good use of these technologies and really adopt these technologies in a thoughtful way. So there are a lot of use cases for open source technologies. The three ones we put here are, very popular with statistical programmers and, people who work in the pharmaceutical industry. But I've gotten emails from, more software development types who have made things like Pinnacle 21 Community. I've received emails from people who have worked on that. There's a defined editor that is actually coded in JavaScript that someone emailed me about, and he was wondering if we could, maybe include Node.js or some other JavaScript framework that is open source. So there's, a lot more opportunities than a lot of people realize with these technologies, not just for, statistical programming and making TLS and what have you, but actually making, full-on applications, or like the Emerging Trends in Technology group has done. They've made chatbots, and there's just a lot of opportunity out there that we have kind of seen as, ripe for, improvement and things like that. So far, we have, I think, around 15 that I have on my mailing list on my computer here. But I've gotten a lot of interest, so we think we're going to split up into sub-teams fairly quickly. So I would encourage anyone who, wants to get involved, or even just wants to, observe our meetings, to, shoot me an email. I can get you added onto that list. We're also looking to kind of improve on, or not necessarily improve, but just make, implementation and validation guidance specifically to open source. There are a lot of concerns on how do you validate this in a regulated environment, how do you do installation, qualification, and things like that. A lot of the work has been already done for us by the code standards group. So we're really just kind of looking to formalize what they've done into a format that's really specific to open source, and how do you, validate that? How does that affect your GXP compliance? Later on, we may be making a, repository for any projects that we've done, any code that we've written that we think would really help out the industry. And again, the code standards group has done a lot on best practices. So we're thinking this might be more of a how do best practices differ between the Python style guide and the tidyverse style guide, and what have you. There's best practices for the use of R packages. It's difficult to validate those. So there is a working group in the industry that's, trying to make a common set of validated packages. So we think our first deliverable is just going to be a priority survey on, what is the industry doing in open source technologies right now, kind of where are the obstacles that we're running into when we're trying to implement a open source solution. And further down the road, we're trying to get a white paper ready for PhUSE Connect 2020. I think that's approaching a lot faster than a lot of people realize, so that might be pushed back. We're not really dealing with any hard and fast dates right now. And of course, TBD. We're really trying to keep it, open and, open for any kind of deliverables, anything we think that would help the industry use these technologies. If you're interested in, helping us out, helping us make these deliverables, these are the project leads right now. Being how large the group is already, we're thinking we're going to kind of you know, pass along the lead roles. So, you know, once a month it might be myself, the next month it might be Michael Rimler at GSK. And that's really just gonna lighten the load on everyone there. If you're interested in, you know, becoming a lead, just, you know, shoot me an email, shoot anyone on this slide here an email. I have my email on our wiki page that I believe was shared earlier. But yeah, we're really looking for people who are, you know, interested in open source technologies and interested in kind of seeing the industry move forward with these tools. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Eli. So I have one question, and that question is for Mary. Where can I find additional details regarding the pilots with the FDA on sharing interactive displays?
Yes, we need to put, we probably do still need to put a summary of that together in a nice place and share that. I think, yeah, right now, yeah, we could certainly had some slides that were part of the breakout sessions. However, yeah, we know we still need to get a better way to share that, and we'll work on that. Okay, maybe great. A future PhUSE webinar, we can talk about just that. Yeah.
Thank you. And any other questions? Just give you a minute to write it in the chat box. Whilst I'm waiting for the questions to come through, just a reminder that the next webinar is on the 24th of July at the same time. I'll be uploading the agenda and the link to register within the next few weeks or so. Okay, well, I'd like to thank you all for attending, and the recording will be uploaded if you would like to share that with your colleagues this week. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.